is me at the controls of a very small aeroplane, taking part in a new scheme to train passengers in small aeroplanes to take over from the pilot in case there's an emergency.
I think you did very well indeed. And you can see just how Val got on and how she was trained later on in the programme. Of course, we flew on far bigger aeroplanes than the one Val was flying on our expedition Blue Peter Flies North. And on our trip to Iceland, you may remember those very small Viking horses that we all rode. Well, we've got some ponies in the studio today that make the Viking horse look just like a giant.
And they're Shetland ponies, and the extraordinary thing is they only stand 30 inches high.
They belong to Jill Shenton, who lives in Derbyshire. And the stallion, which is the chestnut, is called Glamour Boy. And the little one I've got here, the mare, is called Tiny Wish of Chetley, or Wish for short. They're both 4 years old now, so they're fully grown. And Jill thinks that Wish is probably the smallest registered Shetland in Britain.
You probably think that if ponies this size were to have a foal, the foal would be so tiny that you wouldn't be able to see it. And you'd very nearly be right. Because Tiny Wish did give birth to a foal just 3 weeks ago, and John's brought her in now.
Well, when she was born, believe it or not, she only stood 12 inches high. She's grown a little since then, and she's very friendly. She's going to be a chestnut just like her dad, and she hasn't got a name at the moment because Mum is called Tiny, and I mean, what can you call something that's tinier than tiny? I think she wants to get down, or else she's got the hiccups. Steady, steady, steady. There we are. Well, all these three Shetland ponies are pure Shetland ponies, and they get the name from the Shetland Islands, where they were first discovered. But how they got there in the first place, nobody knows.
Well, I rather like the theory that when the Vikings invaded Britain, they brought their famous Viking horses with them, and they left some behind. And in the bitterly cold winters up in the north there of Scotland, only the smallest and the toughest were able to survive, hence the Shetland pony.
Well, it certainly is a possibility, because they do look very like the little horses that we rode in Iceland, and they're also extremely tough.
Well, nowadays, very few Shetlands work. In fact, they're nearly all kept as pets, like these three. And these three do, in fact, live in Jill's garden. Come on, round. Come on. That's it. And they eat mainly grass, except the foal, of course, that still only needs milk. But there's a special treat. They like to have sugar on an apple. I've got some sugar here. Come on, there you are. Try some of that.
Well, Shetland ponies live to be about 40 years old, so in fact Mum and Dad there are still quite young. But because they make such very good pets and they're extremely friendly, they're in demand all over the world. In fact, Shetland ponies are exported from one end of the earth to the other, even to the Soviet Union.
Well, they are absolutely gorgeous. I agree with Johnny. I think they're sweet and very valuable indeed. Well, as Pete said, on Blue Peter Flies North this summer, we all travelled in lots of different aeroplanes, but none of them were quite as small as the one I flew in over Oxford the other week. I'm in a one-engine, four-seater plane, the sort of plane that's becoming increasingly popular these days. Well, I'm not the greatest flyer in the world, but I must say I'm really rather enjoying this, and I've got the greatest confidence in my pilot, John Curd. He's been flying for 30 years, so he's pretty experienced. But just imagine what would happen if we were up here and John suddenly was taken ill and collapsed. Well, I wouldn't know what to do. We'd obviously go out of control and we'd crash. So the British Light Aviation Centre has come up with a marvellous idea. It's a 3-day training scheme for wives and girlfriends of pilots, so that if they're up here and something does happen like that, they have just enough knowledge to be able to land the plane themselves. And the course starts in the classroom.
It has two wings, of course.
On a model of the aircraft, John showed me very briefly what all the controls did, so that when we got up into the air again, I'd know exactly what was what.
The ailerons are controlled by movement of the control column across the cockpit, and the rudder is controlled by your feet on the control column. You're quite happy now?
I think so.
All right, I think we're going to make our way out to the aircraft then.
It didn't take us long to climb into the small plane and strap ourselves in. Then John started up the engine and we were ready for takeoff.
Close the door now,
Like a car, every plane has to have a registration number. Ours was GIF, which in pilot's language is Golf, India, Foxtrot.
Keep your hand on the throttle. Speed is now 50 miles per hour, 60 miles per hour, and we start easing the aircraft into the air now by back of pressure on the control column. There we are, into the air again.
Everything happened so fast that almost before I knew what was going on, we were safely airborne, and John started to show me what all the controls did to the plane in the air.
First, I'm going to show you the effect of moving the primary flying controls. The first control I'm going to demonstrate to you today is the elevator control. Now, if I pull on back on the control column like this, the nose comes up above the horizon, look, and continues to come up until I stop it.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to do that, please, if you would.
When I pulled the control stick back towards me, the land in front of me disappeared and we started to go up. Then I pushed the stick gently away from me and we came back to where we were before. Up there.
That's very nice. Now, the next control we'll consider is aileron control. If we move the control...
Moving the control column to the sides is the way you turn corners in an aircraft. If you turn it to the right wing starts to drop and the plane turns. And moving it back to the left brings you level again. It sounds very easy, but I found it only needed a very light touch. If I'd yanked it too hard, I'd soon have had the plane out of control.
The control column to the right. Right, I'm now going to return to base. We're going to go into a turn to the left this time. Look to the left, all clear. Move the control column to the left, a little touch of rudder, roll the aircraft into the bank.
My first flying lesson was over, and we were on our way back to base. John must have been fairly satisfied with my progress because he wanted me to try and land the aircraft on my own.
Just a hand on the throttle, please, at this point. Just a touch more throttle, will you please? Open up the throttle. That's it. We're going down a little bit too fast. That's it. Beautiful. Start pulling back, please. Line level with the ground. Pull back. Pull back on the stick. On the stick. Pull. Hold it there. Pull. Hold it. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Oh, lovely.
With John's help, I'd managed to land Golf India Foxtrot, and I must say I was feeling very pleased with myself. But there was no time to relax. I was trying to cram 3 days' instruction into a few hours, so we just turned round and got ready to set off again. After my successful landing, John wanted me to try my hand at a takeoff.
Foxtrot, Roger.
India Foxtrot, Roger.
Off we go.
They're laughing at me. Will you do it?
Go on, no, go on, open up. Off we go. Go on. Right open with the throttle.
I'm not holding this.
No, you are. Go on, you've got it. You've got it. Put your hand on the throttle, on the stick. Full power.
The air traffic controllers in the tower were keeping a watchful eye on us as we headed off across the runway once more. With John's prompting, I got us up into the air again, but at the back of my mind I knew that sometime on this flight, if he thought I was good enough, John was going to pretend to collapse and leave me to fly the plane completely on my own. But first, I had to find out where we were going.
Right, we're starting our map reading exercise now from the field at Enstone here, which I've drawn a track going up to Stratford.
John had drawn a line on the map to show me which way we were aiming to go, and when we saw the airfield at Enston below us, we knew we were on the right course. If the weather's fine, navigating a small aircraft like this is a mixture of watching the compass and keeping your eyes open for the landmarks down on the ground. Yes, I've got that.
Good.
I was enjoying myself now and feeling quite confident. But although I knew that sooner or later it would happen, I found I was completely unprepared for John's collapse. John, what's the village over there? John? Now I was entirely on my own. The only person who could help me was the controller back in the tower at Oxford.
This is Golf India Foxtrot here. Over.
Golf India Foxtrot, this is Oxford approach. Go ahead.
I have an emergency. My pilot's collapsed. Can you possibly help me in? I've got just enough knowledge to about land the plane.
India Foxtrot, can you read the instruments?
I can just about read the instruments, I think, yes, if you can possibly help me in.
Roger, would you look at the compass and tell me what your heading is, over?
The tower needed to know in which direction I was flying if they were going to guide me back to the airfield.
Oxford 170, over.
Roger, India Foxtrot, turn left, heading 130, over.
130.
My hands were trembling, but I tried desperately to remember all the things John had told me.
Foxtrot, Oxford.
Oxford Control, I'm reading you, over.
India Foxtrot, Oxford, confirm you are heading 130.
I'm still on heading of 130 at a speed, a height of 2,000, speed 100 miles an hour, over.
Roger, maintain that heading.
The controller knew where I was now and could tell me which way to go, but the rest was up to me.
India Foxtrot, Oxford.
Oxford Control, Golf India Foxtrot receiving you, over.
Roger, turn right 10 degrees. Make your heading now 140, over.
Oxford Patrol, over.
Bring the crash crews to stand by.
Down on the ground, my emergency landing was causing quite a stir. The fire engines rushed out to the runway just in case something went wrong. But up in the air, I was still a long, long way from the ground.
I understand you descend 500 feet, over.
Do not let your speed drop below 75 miles per hour, over.
The voice from the control tower sounded calm and confident, but I was scared out of my mind and very glad I didn't know what was happening on the ground.
Crash 1, Oxford Tower, do you read?
Crash 1.
Roger, Crash 1, the aircraft is a Cherokee, call sign India Foxtrot, with 2 people on board.
India Foxtrot, aim between the 2 parallel white lines.
Aiming between the 2 parallel white lines, over.
Roger, you're doing fine. Down a bit.
Push the nose down a little.
Are you lined up with the runway?
Yes, I'm lined up with the runway.
Roger, hold it there.
You're doing fine. Keep it up. Pull the nose back a little now.
A little more. That's fine.
Hold it there.
Close the throttles now.
Fine. Now put the brakes on.
With the brakes full on, we came to a bumpy, screeching halt.
I think I did it.
Roger, that's fine.
I felt a terrific sense of achievement. I'd landed the plane completely on my own, and if John had really collapsed, I'd have saved not only the plane, but both our lives. Have I got my pilot's license now?
No, we can't give you a pilot's license, but I'm sure we can give you a certificate from the BLAC.
Marvellous,
That was a very good landing.
I enjoyed that.
Very good indeed.
I think that's absolutely great. I was on the edge of my seat.
Congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
was
It was
good.
great fun. I enjoyed it.
Is this a certificate that
Yes,
you got?
it is. I got this for saying I finished the course satisfactorily and I landed safely, which is a jolly good thing, or I wouldn't be sitting here now. And there's John Curt's signature in the corner to say, that I did it. Of course, I'm not a qualified pilot, but if I was in a small plane again, I could take over if anything awful
How
happened.
about VC-10?
No, I couldn't cope with VC-10, not just yet.
It's absolutely marvellous. And it's a great pity there aren't more training courses just like that.
Well, so do I. Actually, talking of training, it is early days at the moment to give Shep an awful lot of lessons, but there are some things that an owner of a new dog can sort of work on right from the word go. One of those things is chewing. Now, Shep, as you probably know, is a bit of a chewer. He chews me, he chews anything. And down here at the moment, you see, he's got a bit of a blue sweater. There go his teeth, straight into it. Now, I've got to stop Shep chewing this thing. And in order to do this, I've got to be quite firm with him, but I've got to take that sweater away from him and give him something that he can chew. Now, this is one of his favourite chews. It's a sort of rubber ring. I'm not going to shout at him, but I will be very firm. I'm going to put my foot down. Right? No. No. Shep. No. No. Right? Yes. There's a good boy. All right. You see, you give him lots of praise when he can chew something, like this rubber ring. That's a good boy. And then he knows what I'm getting at. That's not me. That's, yes. Isn't that super? Hey, put your head in. Go on, there we go. Well, chewing can actually be quite destructive. I mean, if he gets hold of your granny's knitting, then there'll be a few words flying around the kitchen, no doubt. It could also be very dangerous, not only to your puppy, but to you as well. Say, for instance, your pup chews through a bit of electrical leading. Now, something else that I've got to stop Shep doing is licking my face. Now, he's not doing too bad on this, because I've been having a go, and when I pick him up and give him a fuss, there's a good boy. You see, there's a super boy. Yes, I keep my face away from him, make sure he doesn't get too near, and also you'll notice I always move my mouth away from him, because I don't want to pick up any sort of germs off his mouth, or vice versa, for that matter. The best thing to do is to sort of hold him well down, keep your head right away from him. He thinks he wants to go away and play with a pussycat, don't you? There's a good boy. But all the same, you always make a fuss of him. Yes, the pussycat isn't making a fuss of him, is it? But not to worry. I think Shep is a super little pup, and he's very intelligent. Mind you, I've got some hard work, I reckon, ahead of me, because no matter how intelligent it is, it's up to me, really, to teach him all the things that he's got to learn, ain't you? Eh? But, you know, I reckon people just take television for granted. But to me, it's one of the most brilliant inventions ever. It's still a fairly new invention. In fact, it's only 42 years ago to this very day that the first experimental pictures were transmitted by the BBC. It happened on the 30th of November 1929, and this is an exact replica of the first kind of camera that was used.
It was built by the Scottish inventor John Logie Baird, and he called his camera a televisor. It was very roughly made with old electric motors, and he even used the chain wheel of a bicycle here to drive this main shaft. The wooden disc at the end there and this metal disc here have lenses in them, and to take the picture they used to spin around like that. Now, you can see it really is very crude, but it did actually work. But to see the picture that was transmitted by the Baird camera, you needed to have a receiver like the one John's got.
Well, I've taken the cover off this so you can see inside, and it is totally different from a television set of today, which is full of valves, transistors, and lots of wires. This one consists simply of an electric motor, a couple of valves down there, and this disc, which rotates and built up the picture. And it's years since this camera and receiver have actually worked, but I've found some old film of a set in action. The screen was very small, about the size of a postcard, and the picture that you saw was extremely blurred and flickered a lot. Now, on the Baird system, you couldn't transmit the sound at the same time as the picture. So, every so often, the picture would have to be stopped, and then the sound would be transmitted just by itself. And because the picture was so dim, the people who appeared on the television screen, the actors, actresses, and newsreaders, they had to have a special makeup to make sure that their faces stood out and everybody could see it all right. But, you know, if Blue Peter had been invented in the days of the Baird experiments, then we would have looked a bit like this.
And pretty revolting I think I look too. I've got a very sort of pale base all over my face, very dark, black, thick eyebrows, and, believe it or not, navy blue lips. Most extraordinary colour for lipstick. I've even got navy blue lines down the side of my nose and navy blue triangles on either side of my cheek. This was supposed to bring the cheekbones up so that they would show. It really is the most extraordinary colour to use, and this is the sort of tube that the base, the very greasy base, would have come out of. This was the navy blue stick for the lipstick and the triangles and the noses down the lines, and because this was all very greasy indeed, and you'd get very hot and shiny under the studio lights, they used to cover all that up with a very thick-looking powder like this. And this is actually one of the tins of powder that was used all those years ago, over 40 years ago. Well, I think I look pretty peculiar, but in those days nobody thought it was funny at all. They were just astounded that they could even see pictures on television at all.
Well, I think you look absolutely grotesque. No, I shan't. You look a bit like, it's like the horror makeup we put on Johnny not so long ago.
Very weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad we don't have to wear it nowadays. Now, although Baird made history by being the first person ever to transmit a picture, there were far too many snags with his system. It was all tremendously complicated. And for 7 whole years, other people experimented inventing different systems of television. Not mechanical, like Baird's, but electronic ones. And it was an electronic system that the BBC finally chose when, on November the 2nd, 1936, they started the world's first television service ever. The programme came from Alexandra Palace in North London, and this is how it all began.
This is direct television from the studios at Alexandra Palace. And now you're going to see and hear someone you know well.
A mighty maze of mystic magic rays is all about us in the blue.
Well, there wasn't much television in those days, just 2 hours a day on one channel. I should think that was probably enough. Well, the people working for the BBC were adventurous, and in 1937 they made a very historic broadcast. They televised the coronation procession of King George VI. The engineers set up 3 cameras. Unluckily, it rained, but they weren't going to be put off. With covers over the cameras to keep them dry, they carried on with the commentator describing the scene.
Queen Mary in her state coach. Those 8 magnificent greys drawing on that almost unbelievable state coach with their majesties, the King and Queen.
It all went very well, and the world's first outside broadcast was over.
And this camera is exactly like one of those used in the coronation broadcast. There are 2 lenses here at the front. This is the main lens, which actually takes the picture, and this is the lens for the viewfinder that the cameraman looks through. But for the cameraman, there was an enormous snag. Now, if I ask Graham, our Blue Peter cameraman, to move his camera around to look down this viewfinder, I'll get in front of it and you'll see what I mean. OK, Graham, if you can move in. Well, you can see me all right, but as you can see, I'm upside down. Well, this was the way that all television cameramen saw their pictures in the early days of television. And it must have made things very awkward. For instance, in that outside broadcast of the coronation, they would have seen the procession like this. The cameraman saw the marchers upside down and they were going left to right instead of right to left as they really were. And it was all very confusing. But in 1939, television stopped completely because World War II had broken out, and it was found that the enemy planes could actually home on the transmitter signals given out from Alexandra Palace, and obviously it was far too dangerous. And it wasn't until after the war that television programmes started again.
Well, 1950 was an important year. That was the year when children's television began in a big way. The BBC had its own children's studio, and there was a special children's announcer, Jennifer Gay. Here's what Jennifer told children's television audiences 21 years ago.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Gay, one of the Children's Hour announcers. For the next few minutes, I'd like you to see some of the children's programs. Every day at 5 o'clock, we come on the air from this studio, which is the home of Muffin the Mule, Mr. Turnip, Prudence, Hank, and all the stars of Children's Hour. I'm alone in the studio at the moment because rehearsal hasn't started yet. But before it does, perhaps you'd like to come and have a look round with me. This is the camera through which you see me making all my announcements. And there's the microphone which picks up my voice. Over there is all the scenery set ready for the rehearsal.
As Jennifer said, one of the most popular programs of the 1950s was Muffin the Mule. And if your parents watched television when they were your age, I bet they'll remember him. Muffin was a puppet who got on top of a grand piano played by Annette Mills. Here's a bit of one of the programs.
Hello, everyone. And now we're going to give you just a little bit of our... Muffin, stop it. Stop. Shh. Yes, I know. All right. I'm just going to tell them about it. Don't get so excited. You see, this is our percussion band. Yes, it's a one-man band, isn't it, Muffin? Yes, one mule band. Sorry. You see, he plays the cymbals with his nose, the drum with his hoofs, and the bell with his tail. Isn't that marvellous?
It is indeed. Good old Muffin. Mind, television's come a long way since the days of Muffin the Mule. First of all, there was Telstar, the satellite that made it possible to get live television pictures all the way from America. And now, of course, there are satellites just about everywhere up there, which enable you to get pictures from just about anywhere in the world.
Yes, and of course we've got colour television. If you're lucky enough to have a colour television, you'll know I'm wearing a green shirt. Val's got on a blue dress.
Well, one technical feat that really outshines all others took place this year, only 2 months ago, when live colour pictures were transmitted direct from a remotely controlled camera on the moon. Millions of people all over the world could see exactly what was happening over 250,000 miles away.
71. First day of issue. What could be a better place to cancel the stamp than right here at Hadley Rill?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the first Blue Peter transmitted from the moon, and judging by that, it might not be so long before we're all up there.
Mind you, it's quite amazing that today is the anniversary since the first BBC picture was transmitted 42 years ago, isn't it?
Now pictures from the moon. Fantastic, isn't it? Well, back to Earth, we've been busily sorting out all the limericks that you've been sending in for our competition. And the closing date is the first post on Monday. So you've got tonight, you've got tomorrow, you've got Saturday, and you've got Sunday if you still haven't written one and you want to go in for that competition.
Oh, but do please put on your name and address and your age, because no matter how brilliant your limerick is, if that isn't on, well, we can't send you a prize.
Well, that's because, to be absolutely fair, we divide all our Blue Peter competitions up into different age groups. Just a little reminder about what a limerick is. They always have 5 lines. The first 2 lines must rhyme. The second 2 lines must rhyme. You always need a funny or nonsensical last line.
Ah, which reminds me, you see, we've had an anonymous lyric sent in by somebody called Uncle Ben. Just listen to this. A lovely young lady named Valerie charms us all from the pit to the gallery. With her feminine grace and a lovable face, damn it, I'd double her salary.
Super idea.
No, she wrote it herself.
You guessed.
That's terrible. Mind you, don't copy anything. Make sure that your limerick is all your own work. And, of course, Uncle Ben's done it virtually anonymously there, so his can't go into the competition.
No prize for Uncle Ben.
That's it. We'll be back on Monday. when we'll be trying to break a very powerful British record right here in the studio.
And I'll be travelling north once again to find out about yet another famous person in history, this time Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh, see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.